Hey guys, so today we're on 5.9 and we're going to be looking at the global system of agriculture. We're just going to be touching on some of the main ideas. So just the ability to be able to explain interdependence among regions of agricultural production and consumption. So this includes things like food and other agricultural products are part of a global supply chain. That's something that we previously kind of touched on already. Some countries have become highly dependent on one or more export commodities, and also main elements of global food distribution networks are affected by political relationships, infrastructure, and also patterns of world trade. So, in terms of like global trade, our globalized trade networks absolutely include different agricultural products. So, just like with any other type of product on the global market, there's this interdependence between countries that import and export food products. So, that is, I think, beautifully pictured here, right? Where we see exported food products and then imported food products. So exported, imported, exported, imported. And you just see this, it's like such a perfect image of this web of interdependence. So countries that have surplus products will export. This also includes specialization in luxury crops like coffee, sugar, tea, and also this idea of a northern and southern hemisphere relationship, in that the seasons are opposite. So when one hemisphere is experiencing winter, then the opposite hemisphere will send food and vice versa. So there are cons of import dependence, and that includes economic and environmental cons. So for economic, we see that in developing countries, farmers start to rely on exporting luxury crops, which, doesn't sound like a bad thing, right? Because they do make some money. However, this does lead to the need to purchase actual food that they eat. So instead of growing subsistence, they instead grow for export, and then they have to purchase their own food. Because they're importing their food, it tends to be more expensive. And then also in terms of developing countries and their economic reliance on imported food, we do start to see these elements and dynamics of neocolonialism. For environmental, we see, again, more so in developing countries where they don't have the same kind of like farming practices with as much, let's say, technology. We see water pollution, deforestation, soil erosion, and salinization, or when like the soil becomes salty, like sodium increases. And then also we see monocropping, which means that it's not always environmentally sustainable. Monocropping tends to lead to soil erosion. So also this idea that modern systems are tied to colonialism and neocolonialism. So we've already touched on agribusiness. So in this, I guess, political element of agriculture, agribusinesses are based or owned in developed countries. So that means that the profits that are made, that majority of wealth goes to foreign investors, not necessarily people who are from that country. So again, very like neo-colonialistic. Land often is owned by foreigners. So again, this idea of other people coming in and using these resources for themselves. And then also, these trade relationships are often continuations of colonial powers and their former colonies. So those links still exist. So we do have something called fair trade that just kind of attempts to balance some of these dynamics. They try to protect workers, and for the requirements, there are certain standards that must be upheld in order to be labeled fair trade. So here are some of them. They go hand in hand with SDGs here. So these are just some of the practices that they uphold and require in order to be considered fair trade. For infrastructure and agriculture, developed infrastructure is necessary to transport goods efficiently. So, in developing countries, we see farmers that maybe don't have the same kind of access to transportation networks or to reliable transportation networks, whereas farmers in developed countries, they have far more reliable and more options for transportation, which means that it tends to be less expensive for those farmers. And it's also cheaper for consumers to purchase. So, when it comes to like commercial agriculture, we see that being a big advantage. So that's it for